Asato ma angamaya tamaso ma mrityama avir avirma rudrayate dakshina Namam Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, O Lord, and protect us evermore with your loving presence. Om, peace. Hi. So, as Vedant said, my name is Swami Arupeshananda, and the title of tonight's talk is What Should I Do with My Life? And before I get started, I want to congratulate all of you for coming here. Because I was a student here once when I was your age or so, and I know that you have a lot of alternatives to this. And I also know that on this campus in particular, and I suspect more or less all college campuses, there is a thought current which is completely opposed to spiritual life. There is a huge momentum here for ambition, career advancement, enjoyment, parties, fun, excitement. All these alternatives are competing with the spiritual agenda. So to push all those things out of the way and come here for an hour or so to listen and hopefully talk a little bit about spiritual life and Dharma is no small accomplishment, in my opinion. So just being here means something. You have put other things aside in the interest of spiritual growth. And so congratulations for that. I know this place, and I know there are many other things you could be doing. So, what should I do with my life? I thought it was appropriate because we're all at that stage. Well, not all of us, but a lot of us are in this stage where we're making this decision. So, in order to consider our options more closely, I am going to present the ideal life. I don't really need to use the board for this, but I'm going to. So, what I'm going to talk about is the life that no one gets, that we would all love to have. This is a life where everything goes just so, just like you would want it to go. So the first thing that happens is you're born and everything's fine. There's no birth defects. There's no brain damage. You get enough oxygen during delivery so that you don't have cerebral palsy. Your mom doesn't need a C-section. You don't kill her when you're born. And your parents want you. They chose to have you. They decided to have a child because they thought that perhaps they would have more love in their lives if they had a child. So you are wanted. You are not put up for adoption. And you have loving parents who are going to try their best to raise you. So that's your birth. Of course, we know that not all those things happen all the time. We're already pretty fortunate here. Okay, then comes childhood. And I'm going to again assume that everything is just so. Your father and mother are good people. They don't drink and spend all the money on profligate living. They don't abuse you sexually, physically, verbally, in any way. They actually care about you, and they are hardworking, exemplary people who show you how to live a responsible life and have a comfortable enough living where they can put away some money to save for your education so that you can go to a nice university like this one someday. So all these nice things happen in your childhood. Good parents who care about you and are responsible and don't get divorced. Then comes adolescence and college. I'll write it all out. So we will assume, again, that your adolescence is relatively trauma-free. You are not tormented by your peer group for being socially inept, being hideously disfigured, or whatever else. You have reasonable athletic skills, you get along with people, you're sufficiently intelligent to do well enough on standardized tests so that you can enter a university. And in the university, once you're there, you meet the man or woman or non-binary, whatever they are now, of your dreams. And you're going to marry this person. You fall in love, head over heels. You marry this person. You major in something that is gainfully employable. You're an engineer, or you're a pre-med, or you're a business person. And upon graduation, you have a wonderful job. You have a spouse, job, house. The boss likes you. The job is stable. He contributes to your 401k plan. He thinks you're intelligent, treats you well. Your wife or husband also, after 10 or 20 or 30 years of devoted marriage, still thinks you're interesting and physically attractive, still wants to listen to your stories, is actually not just putting up with you, but still is fond of you after 20 or 30 years of marriage. Okay, you have children, they all have perfect teeth, they all are intelligent, hardworking, and they go to college and they get gainful careers, and you retire. And eventually, someday, you're going to die, and your loving family will gather around you and tell you just how wonderful you've been in their lives, what a benefit it's been to know you, and then you will float off into the next world. Okay, so that is the perfect life. And of course, hopefully I've communicated, perhaps through sarcasm, that this never happens. We all understand that. Something or other here is going to go south. The marriage, the job, the house, earthquake, fire, flood, whatever else. Government collapse, economics. So many options are there. But I assumed that none of those things happened. So let us ask ourselves this question. Is there security in this life? Do you have security here? Assuming that everything went right, do you have any security in this life? Well, I would say no. Why? Because what I've painted here is a life which is a continual succession of favorable outcomes. We've got one optimal life situation following another from day one when you're born all the way to the last day of your life. Reasonable. I mean, you didn't win the lottery. Nothing amazingly wonderful happened, but you had a successful life every single day. Every single thing that could reasonably expect it to go well did. And so the problem with this, the problem with a life that is a continual sequence of successful outcomes is that each life situation, all these things I said, each life situation is borrowed against a background of inferior alternatives. We see that. So all the nice things I said happen with your job, with your marriage, with your parents, all these things. They come at the expense of a background of alternatives which would be worse. And we know somehow in our consciousness, even during the good moments of our lives, that this can't realistically continue. Even, we have nice moments where we're at rest. We have a nap on a Sunday afternoon. We're kind of relaxed. And yet we understand that as long as our security depends on a particular life situation, we are in jeopardy. We see the point here. It's just not plausible, this life that I've put up. So, if there is no security in this life, as I am arguing, is there peace? No, you cannot have peace without security, because if you don't have security, you're going to have anxiety. And if you have anxiety, of course, you're not at peace. If there's no peace, as Sri Krishna says in the Gita, where is happiness? So what I've done here is I have assumed in this question of what should I do with my life, that the answer we all have is, I want to be happy. Whatever it is that we think we want to do, we want to be an engineer or doctor or lawyer or whatever else, we're doing that because we think it's going to make us happy. This actually isn't always clear to us. I knew a woman, she actually died a few years back, but she got divorced from her husband because his craze for money, his greed was too much for her. He constantly harped on how to get more money. All the time he was thinking, how can I make more money, wheeling and dealing? And eventually it ruined their marriage. One day she asked him, she said, would you rather be rich or happy? And immediately, without thinking at all, he said, rich. He had forgotten why he wanted to be rich. The idea of wealth and happiness were so wedded in his mind that you couldn't conceive of happiness without wealth. And so wealth was the answer, knee-jerk reaction. We forget sometimes, and I would actually give you guys more credit than this. I think probably you're more thoughtful than Frank was. I knew him. But it is possible to forget why we're doing what we're doing. It's possible to forget that if we want to be an influencer on YouTube, it's not actually because we want to be an influencer on YouTube. It's because we think that's going to make us happy and secure, which it won't. And people don't believe me when I say this, especially with money. When you think, if I just had enough money, I would be secure. I would withstand all these problems, potential problems that didn't happen in my diagram. I would be able to withstand all those problems if I had enough money. There was a book, came out, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago. It was called Never Enough, From Barista to Billionaire. You know it? No. It was written by an entrepreneur named Andrew Wilkinson. And the title kind of describes the book, Never Enough, The basic message of the book was money cannot buy you happiness. And from barista to billionaire, yes, he was a barista and he became almost a billionaire. He had like 900 something million dollars. And he wrote this book, which was basically an autobiography. And the moral of the story was money can't buy you happiness. One interesting thing in the book, I thought, and that's the rest of it's kind of just an elaboration on that. But one interesting thing in the book was a question that these hyper-ambitious money hunters ask each other. So they're all on Wall Street in New York or somewhere in New York fighting for money. And they have this kind of crazed money lifestyle. And they ask each other this question. This question is, what is your number? What is your number? In other words, what number would you have to see in your bank account to get you to stop this insanity? That's what that question means. This crazy lifestyle that you have adopted in order to become fabulously wealthy, that is driving you insane slowly, because apparently that's what it does, I've heard. What number would you have to see in your bank account to stop this madness? And the interesting thing was, there is no number. The number is a factor of 2 of what you already have. That's the number. If you have 1 million, you want 2 million. If you have 2 million, you want 4 million. You get 4, you want 8. Up until you get to $40 million. Then what happens when you get to $40 million? When you get to $40 million, it becomes a factor of 10. And that's something? That is straight out of the Bhagavatam. That is straight out of the Bhagavata Purana. What does it say? It says, desire cannot be satisfied by the mere fulfillment of its urge. It is said that that is like trying to put out a fire by pouring ghee, we could say gasoline, and have gasoline in the Mahabharata or in the Bhagavatam. That is like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. And there it is right there. You see these guys keep pouring gasoline on this money desire. And what happens? Eventually you get more and more and more, and it explodes. The desire explodes into something much larger. Always on the horizon, never in your hand. There is, what I'm saying, this idea that we will find security by some worldly situation. Money, fame. I'll give you another example. This is also interesting. Not just money that we think is going to make us secure. This was, what's his name? The Friends guy who died recently, Matthew Perry. Sound familiar? Remember that? He died just like a year or 2 ago, drug overdose. He had all these inner demons he couldn't tame, and eventually killed himself through basically lack of self-control, I guess you could say. And his own addictions killed him. But what's interesting about this is that before he landed the part of, I actually never saw the show, but it was Chandler, I think. He landed the part of Chandler, I think, on the show. Before that, he was reading a story in a tabloid magazine, which now it's like Instagram gossip accounts. We don't have, tabloids aren't such a big deal. They're still there in the grocery store, but I think everybody looks at Instagram now for celebrity gossip. Anyway, back then it was magazines. And there's a contemporary of his, Charlie Sheen. I don't know if you know that name. You do, because you're my age or so. He was on a TV show called 2.5 Men. He's been in a lot of stuff. He had a long career. His father was an actor. Charlie Sheen was a train wreck. He was drugs, prostitutes, rehabs, jails, all that, just destroying himself at the age of like 19 or 20. His fame he could not handle. And so Matthew Perry is reading about him. They're about the same age. Matthew Perry is reading about him and all the disasters that he's going through. And he thinks to himself, okay, But what does he care? He's famous. Think about that, the thought process there. What does he care? He's famous. In other words, being famous is a sufficiently successful outcome to protect you against all of life's adverse alternatives. Whatever happens to you, you'll be fine if you're just famous. It's not infinite money in the bank, but it's just another worldly position that he erroneously thought was going to give him security, peace, and happiness, which is what we all want, of course, in life. So what happened? At that moment, he got down on his knees and prayed. He had never prayed before in his life, he said. He got down on his knees and prayed to God, "Dear God, I don't care what you do with me, just make me famous." 1 week later, he got the role of Chandler on Friends. That is straight out of the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna says, most men worship the devas for worldly gain. This kind of worldly gain can be acquired very quickly in this world. And yes, he prayed for the first time sincerely. He really believed this was going to save him from his inner demons. And in a week, he was on the show of Friends. The point is this: whatever we think out there, whether it is fame or the perfect person, the perfect number in your bank accounts, the perfect external situation, whatever it is that we think is going to give us security, peace, and happiness, which whatever vocation we choose is what we're looking for in life. Whatever that worldly situation is not sufficient insurance against life's vicissitudes. We have to have something more reliable than a worldly situation, a worldly acquisition. We need a spiritual foundation. Something inside. Happiness is not going to be found outside. It has to be found inside, something inside our own consciousness. Now, we may understand this. You may agree with me or not. These arguments I put up, I think they're logical. Maybe you have found some flaw in them, but I think they're pretty logical and compelling. You may also think this. On the other hand, in spite of the logic and the compulsion behind the arguments, assuming they did sway you, there's the problem of desire. Yes, I see that there is no particular life. There is no particular life situation that is going to make me happy. Yes, I see that. On the other hand, I still want to be famous, still want to be rich. I still want to meet Mr. or Mrs. Rights. I still want these things. They don't have to be rational. Desire is still there. Just because you've said something that made sense to me has not gotten rid of my desire. The real problem is desire, fulfilling our desire, making our desires go away so that we can obey our own logical conclusions about life. Right now we've reached one, but we've got this huge block that says, okay, but I want it anyway, whatever it is. So what do we do when we have a desire that perhaps we intellectually understand isn't going to be fulfilling, and yet we realize we're going to have to pursue this? Well, there is a way to do it, according to the Bhagavad Gita. That is through the path of duty. Sri Krishna says, duty well done fulfills desire like Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow. You probably are familiar with Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow. I don't want to go too far afield. I won't tell you that story. But magical cow gives you whatever you want. So duty well done fulfills desire. Let's take the wealth example. How do we do that well? We want money. We have a couple of options. We can work hard here at UCLA, study something, electrical engineering, tough major, study hard, do well, find a job after you graduate, get a comfortable living, raise a family, buy the house, do all these things I put on the board. What happens with that? Well, we have a sense of personal merits. We've worked hard for this. We've earned this money. We didn't cheat in school. We didn't cheat on the job. We've earned this money. We've acted responsibly. We've raised a family. We've done our duty. Alternatively, we could go rob a bank. That's another way to get money. Actually, not very practical these days. Probably you want to do something clever with, there's too many cameras, right? You'll get caught. So however people steal money now, crypto or whatever. So what's the difference? When they both give us money, why is one so bad and the other, assuming you don't get caught, what's the problem? The problem is, instead of all of those nice things that I said, a sense of accomplishment through hard work, a sense of self-worth because we have been responsible and earned our money fair and square, instead of these things, we get anxiety. What if somebody catches me? We get self-doubt. We steal a bunch of money, we move to a nice neighborhood. All my neighbors, I think they may have earned this, but I didn't. There's a kind of inferiority complex we get there. What I'm talking about is our self-image. This in Vedanta, I'm sure probably most of you already know this, but I'll say it anyway. This is called samskara. So, samskara. Samskara is mental impression due to repeated action. So you could say it's kind of like a memory. If you had something that you remembered 100,000 times until it drilled a groove into your mind and it becomes an unconscious habit. So every time we act, we have an action, according to yoga psychology. This action leaves an impression in our minds called a samskara. And what happens with samskaras? They eventually kind of bubble up to the surface and influence our actions. This is actually an experience. You don't have to believe this. This is an experience that we've all had. I'll give you a simple example. Say you're telling a story. And you can't remember the name of something. You're telling somebody a story, something that happened, you can't remember the name of whoever, the movie star or whatever that you're trying to, or sports star. And somehow you stumble through the story, you try and try and try. When you're telling a story, you try to remember the name of whoever it was and you can't do it. And somehow you stumble through the story and that's the end and you go home, you forget all about it. And then the next day in the shower, you think, oh, Michael Jordan, or whatever it was that you couldn't think of. So what happened? We did something. We tried and tried and tried to remember something, and we failed. It didn't work. And yet, there was an impression, something it made in the mind. It had some effect. And then later on, this thing bubbled back up to our consciousness. And we thought, oh yeah, Michael Jordan. So this is actually, this relationship here is something that we've actually all experienced. This isn't a matter of belief. Now, where belief comes in is where we have the idea of samskaras inherited from previous births. That is something that you could say requires belief. Although I would say that really, if you are open-minded, this idea of reincarnation is the most reasonable explanation of our human experience. Why? Because simply past life memories in children. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's plenty of literature from all over the world about kids who remember their past lives. They actually remember impossible things, things that there is absolutely no reasonable explanation. There's no random chance that could allow them to know the arcane things they know about some life that they have never been exposed to. This has been documented again and again. People have tried to explain it away, and the reasoning is clearly motivated. Whereas the simplest explanation is that these kids are remembering a past life. That's what they say. And in fact, it's kind of nice to read some of this stuff because you find parents that are very hostile to this idea. They don't want their kids, for example, born-again Christians I know, had a kid who remembered his past lives, and they were on the warpath to make this go away. They did not want to believe in reincarnation because it was against their belief system. So there's plenty of these cases where people actually remember their past lives. Why don't the rest of us remember our past lives? I don't know. We don't, most of us. But the fact that a few do, well, that's pretty compelling evidence for reincarnation. So this idea, these samskaras, debts of mental impressions that we have gained through a journey of many, many lives, according to Puranas, in this world and in others, in human forms and in others. We have had many actions, and they have led to many mental impressions. And these mental impressions determine our character. What is our character? It is our self-image. It is a collection of habits that govern our behavior. And so when we choose righteous action, what we do is we plant good samskaras in the subconscious mind. And these good samskaras come back and encourage us to do more righteous action. This, according to the Mahabharata, is really the way to find happiness, righteous action. That's how you're supposed to be happy. This is a story that probably some of you know, called the Yaksha Prajna. Does that sound, you know it? You know it too, okay. So for those of you who don't know it, I'll do it very fast. The Pandava brothers are wandering in the forest, and they get thirsty. And Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, sends the youngest brother out to go get water. He goes, wanders around, finds a lake. There's a yaksha, who is actually in the story a magical talking bird. The magical talking bird says to the youngest brother, wait, don't drink that water, first answer my questions. And the youngest brother ignores the bird, drinks the water, and drops over dead. They wait, he doesn't come back. They send the next youngest brother to go find him and find water. He finds him at the lake, dropped dead. He's super thirsty. Bird says, wait, don't drink that water. He drops over dead. Repeat this 2 more times. Finally, Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, gets to the lake. And the bird says, wait, don't drink the water. And he listens. Sees all his brothers there dead and thinks, maybe I should listen to this bird. And he does. Fascinating set of questions that Yudhishthira and the bird go through. I don't know how many, probably more than 100. Worth the read. One of the questions that the bird asks Yudhishthira, by what means does one find happiness? By what means does one find happiness? And Yudhishthira says, by right conduct. The way to be happy is to be good. And I think that most people want to be good. The reason we're not is because it's hard. Whatever we choose to do with our lives, whether you are an engineer, politician, medical doctor, lawyer, anything else, whatever you are, whatever you choose to do, sooner or later, you will be faced with temptations for money, for flesh, for ill-gotten recognition. Almost guaranteed. This world seems to be designed to test our character in this way. You think, well, I'll get a job that doesn't have this kind of trial. And some jobs clearly lend themselves to these kinds of temptations more than others. Probably a politician is going to face more temptations about corruption than an engineer or a school janitor or something. You know, there's all that power there. It's easier to get corrupted. On the other hand, in some way or other, we will all face some situation that challenges our personal code of conduct. We will all face this. And what Yudhishthira says is, if you want to be happy, you have got to adhere to your personal code of conduct in the face of temptation. As it says in the Imitation of Christ, we do not typically know what we can do, but temptation makes clear what we are. And I would say in the Hindu tradition, that's not quite right. We wouldn't look at it that way. We wouldn't interpret it that way, because what we are doesn't change. Fundamentally, what we are is divine, is the Atman, the real self. That's what we are. What we think ourselves to be, on the other hand, is what the Imitation of Christ is talking about. Temptation makes plain what we think ourselves to be, and that is this. If we are tempted, and if we rise above it, what happens? Empowerment. I didn't do it. I held to my principles. I stuck to my guns. I did the right thing. These are very strong thoughts. Very strong thoughts. And they get buried in our subconscious, and they come up to help us in future situations. And why are we not good? Because we have a history, we're all mixed bags here. We've got good and bad samskaras. We've got our own weaknesses and our strengths that, according to Vedantic thinking, we have earned through the transmigration of subtle body through many, many lives. So, why is it so difficult to be good? Because we have a habit of not doing good. And the way to be good is to form a habit of doing good. This is basically yoga. There are many different kinds of yoga that we can practice, but to store strong, constructive impressions in the subconscious and have good samskaras that influence our behavior when life throws us curveballs, yoga is what's taught in Vedanta. What I talked about in the very beginning about the perfect life, and is it going to bring me happiness? Is it going to bring me the security and peace that I want? That is actually a kind of yoga called jnana yoga. We are analyzing the object of our desire. That's what we're doing there. We are picking it apart. What is this exactly? And is it really going to bring me what I want? This is discrimination, jnana yoga. I'll write it down. It's not spelled like it sounds. Pronounced jnana yoga. This here, the action purifying the samskaras, karma yoga. The idea behind this is to act unselfishly, to be virtuous, not with any motivation except to do good because you are good. To give to the homeless person that asks of you, not because you want him to say thank you, not because you want someone to film it on their phone and post it on YouTube or whatever, Instagram, I guess. But to just do good, to be generous because you are generous. I am a generous person. I am a giving person. I am a good person. I do the right thing. Actions that drive home those kinds of samskaras will help us to do the right thing in the future, which, according to the Mahabharata and probably your own personal experience, I would imagine, brings us happiness. It is not money, it is not fame, it is no particular position, profession, person in our lives that is going to make us happy. The happiness has to be found within. Nevertheless, since the title of this talk is What Should I Do with My Life? I'm going to talk a little bit about practical answers. And so this is an ancient Chinese proverb that has many variations that probably you are somewhat familiar with about happiness. How to find it, by doing what, and how long it lasts. So, if you want to, now tell me, I'm curious if you've heard this before. If you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. Sound familiar? No? If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. No? Haven't heard this? Okay. If you want to be happy for a week, buy a new car. This next one's kind of sad. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. That's a little cynical. If you want to be happy for a year, buy a new house. If you want to be happy for 10 years, get a dog. If you want to be happy for a lifetime, devote yourself to a righteous cause. And if you want to be happy for eternity, know yourself. So I think this idea of being happy for an eternity by knowing yourself is a little too abstract for most people. This is basically why people like me put on these kinds of clothes. That's what we're trying to do. We are trying to, either you could call it self-realization, God realization, spiritual growth. You have devoted your life, however imperfectly, to spiritual progress with the idea that you will find this kind of permanent state of bliss. So, like I say, I think that's probably a little too abstract of a goal for most people. I think for most people, even spiritual people, the ideal is to be happy for a lifetime. And I think the advice here is pretty good. Devote yourself to a righteous cause. Now, does that mean that you can't be a lawyer, or you can't be an engineer, or you have to be something or other? I don't think it does. I think what it means is that you have to act unselfishly. There has to be some part of your life that is specifically dedicated to giving of yourself, being part of a greater good. This, I think, we have to allot time for. I remember when I was a student here, we had something called Project Literacy. Do they still have that? They do. About that. Okay. Amazing. So we used to go to Watts and teach the kids, the inner city kids there, how to read. So I guess that's still an option. There are others on this campus. We also did something which I actually know is dead now, called Sweet Strings. And I was a violin player. And so we went down to Watts and taught violin to the inner city kids. We brought a bunch of violins, we got a grant and did all that. That died. But anyway, there are things like it. Soup kitchens, all this stuff. To try and give something of yourself so that we can strengthen this idea of being good and doing good for no other reason. Yes, it will also pad your resume. Yes, that's also true. Whatever these things are, you can put it on your application to med school or grad school or whatever. That's not why you're doing it. The reason you're doing it, I do good because I am good. That fundamental self-perception is essential for good behavior, and that is essential for happiness. And if you're here and you're interested in this, I think you can do it. If you're willing to sacrifice this time for a Dharma talk, you are also, you're effectively already here because you want to be a good person and you feel like you are a good person and you want to hold on to that. And so this actually isn't that much of a stretch, I would say. I find it very encouraging that you've come. Really, I do. So thank you very much. I will say a closing prayer. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti. May the good Lord protect us. May he guide us. May he give us strength and right understanding. May our study be vigorous and fruitful. May love and harmony be with us all. Om. Peace. You know, I said something like this to the USC group